So, hi everyone, my name is Dobrow. I'm an advisor at Sean Phillips here at Ohio Wesleyan. My project is Dobrow, artificial intelligence for the board game Battleline. The goal of this project was to build a computer program that could play the board game Battleline without being given case-by-case specific logic, and rather by following a general mathematical model. So quickly, an overview of the game. It's a two-player, turn-based strategy board game where players fight for control of 9 flags. You win the game when you've won any 5 of the 9 flags, or any 3 adjacent flags. The way you kind of do this is by using a deck of true cards and deck of tactic cards. The true cards have values 1 through 10 in 6 different colors. The tactic cards are 10 unique cards that give you special abilities or advantages. So on a given turn, you're going to take one of the 7 cards in your hand, you're going to place it in front of one of the 9 flags, and you're going to draw a card to replace your hand back up to 7. So the actual mechanics for how we fight over control of the flags is through what we call formations. This is essentially a 3-card poker hand that each player is going to have in front of one of the flags. Whoever has the stronger formation wins the flag. So the strength of those formations are as follows. First is a straight flush. That's 3 cards in the same color in a row. The next would be 3 of a kind, 3 cards of the same value. Next is a flush, 3 cards in the same color, not necessarily in a row. Next is a straight, 3 cards in a row, not necessarily in the same color. And the last is just trash, any 3 cards together. So here's some examples of some of those. Here we see a 3 of a kind versus a straight flush. The straight flush would win. Here we have a flush versus a 3 of a kind. The 3 of a kind would win. Here we have a straight versus a flush. The flush would win. Here we have trash versus straight. The straight would win. In the case of a tie like this, both players have a 3 of a kind. Tie goes to whoever has the highest total. Here it's 18 versus 3, the player on top. Because of that, the strongest formation you can hope to get would be the highest straight flush, so a 10-9-8 straight flush. So the previous work done on this is 2 years of work before I came in, was done by RU students Daniel Liddell and Haley Wright, both working under Sean. And some of the things they had when I came in at the beginning of the summer, first was a user interface. It kind of looks like this. It was a little application you could run on your computer to play as a human against the computer. They also had basic logic for how the AI made its decision making. They used a probabilistic model that kind of went like this. They said, for every single option I could possibly have, consider my chance of winning the game via that option, and pick the option that maximizes it. So they said for each of the 7 cards in my hand, for each of the 9 flags I could place it on, calculate the following 3 things. First, calculate the 13 strongest formations I could make. Then calculate the chance of winning the flag as a probability union of the chance of winning via each of those formations. So you say the chance of winning that flag is the chance of me winning via the first formation, or the second formation, or the third, etc. And then they calculate the chance of winning the game as a function of those 9 probabilities of winning each of the flags. They also had some basic logic for how they dealt with those specific tactic cards and when to use them and how to use them. So with that, this is where I came in. Deep Barca is the name of my program. This is a reference to the chess computer Deep Blue. Barca here is a reference to Hannibal Barca, who is one of the greatest military strategists of all time. So the first thing I did was actually took their logic for how the AI made decisions and completely started over. And with that, there were 3 main overhauls I made. The first was the logic for how to calculate the chance of winning a flag. So we broke this down into 3 cases. The first was if neither player has touched that flag yet, we simply say the chance of winning the flag is 50%. If both players have touched the flag yet, we use what we call the multiple formation approach, which is very similar to what Daniel and Haley had in the past, which is to calculate some of my top formations, some of your top formations, and calculate the probability union of all the favorable pairings of those for me. The last case, which is kind of interesting, is when one player has touched the flag, but the other player has yet to touch the flag. Here we use a fusion of 2 different approaches. One of them is that same multiple formation approach I just discussed. The other is what we call the best single formation approach. In this case, instead of considering all the possible formations that I can make on the flag, we instead just calculate the one single best formation that you can make and compare that to all of my opponent's formations. So each one of these approaches by itself was a little bit weak. The multiple formation approach, the problem was it was very, very pessimistic. So it favored the player who had yet to touch the flag a lot, because all the formations that it was considered for them were simply just the strongest formations in the game, all the 10 high, 9 high, 8 high straight flushes. The best single formation approach, this one didn't work very well by itself because it was a little too narrow, as you could kind of expect. It would miss potentially decent formations that it could be shooting for because it was only going for that one best possible formation. The combination of the 2 works pretty well and it makes pretty intelligent decisions. The next big overhaul I made was with the logic for calculating the chance of winning the game. So remember, there are 2 win conditions here. You can win 5 out of the 9 flags, or you can win any 3 adjacent flags. So we need to have some function of the 9 probabilities of winning flags that took into account these 2 potential win conditions. The first thing we considered was a combinatorial logic. We said, consider all the ways that the 9 flags fall between the players and the order in which they do so, and just count up all the favorable outcomes for myself. The problem with this is that this was extremely computationally inefficient because it was running 9 factorial different computations in different states every single turn. And that wasn't really viable for us. So the next thing we considered was simply taking an average of the 2 win conditions. Calculate my chances of winning 5 of the 9 flags, calculate my chances of winning any 3 in a row, and just take the average of the 2. Again, this wasn't really great because it would make some stupid decisions where it probably should have been focusing on 3 in a row, and it was going for 5 out of 9, and vice versa, and it was missing potential win. What we settled on was a weighted average of those 2 win conditions as a function of time. So in the beginning of the game, we're much more focused on just winning 5 out of 9, because we're essentially saying we want to do as well as we can on as many flags as possible. By the end of the game, when we could potentially win the game in the next turn or 2, we're more focused on 3 in a row. So we're more than happy to sacrifice a flag in the corner if it means we're going to win 3 in a row somewhere else in the board. The last big overhaul I made was with how we dealt with tactic cards. So with tactic cards, there are 2 main questions we asked. The first was, when do we draw tactic cards? The next is, when do we play tactic cards? And then tactic cards are kind of interesting. You can't play them unlimited. So you can at most play 1 more tactic card than your opponent at any given time. So if I play 1 tactic card, my opponent has yet to play a tactic card, I can't play my second until they've played their first. So because of that, we want to be really particular with when we actually make the decision to start playing tactic cards. So when we draw tactic cards, what we boiled it down to was simply, if our opponent can potentially win a flag on their next turn, we want to draw a tactic card, have one in our hand to potentially be able to stop them. For when to play tactic cards, there are 2 main cases, the defensive case and the offensive case. Defensive, meaning if we can play a tactic card to stop our opponent from winning a flag, definitely consider doing so. Offensive, meaning if we can play a tactic card to potentially win the game, definitely consider doing so. So, with the course of the thing, we found a few cool instances of intelligence. So notice that the goal of this project was not to build an AI that could mimic mine or my advisor's playstyle as close as possible. The goal of the project was to give an AI the rules of the game and a very general mathematical model to follow, and have it come up with some intelligent and quality decision on its own. So we found some cool instances of this, mostly when we had situations where it did something that at first seemed really dumb to us, and we didn't really understand why it made that decision. So oftentimes what was happening in these situations was the computer was just doing way more computations than a human. So a human would see a situation, and we kind of just assume that, well, that can't be favorable for us, that option can't be viable. And because the computer actually was doing so much computations, it actually broke it down and said, well, mathematically, that actually is a viable option, and went for it. The other thing we found that was really interesting was that the computer evaluates 8 to be stronger than 10. So by this we mean it would rather play an 8 on an empty flag than play a 10 on an empty flag. So even though 10 is technically a strong card, it wins all the ties, the 8 is eligible for more straight flushes than the 10. So the 10 is only eligible for the 10-9-8 straight flush, while the 8 is eligible for the 10-9-8, 9-8-7, and 8-7-6 straight flushes. So this was kind of interesting. And what we really liked about this was that we never explicitly told the computer that 8 is greater than 10 or that 10 is greater than 8. This kind of came up with it on its own. It's following the model that we gave it very consistently, and it's coming up with some decisions that are really interesting and quality moves. Really cool to see. So with that, results, how did we do in the end? We kind of measured the quality of our program in 2 different ways. First, we said strength, how well it does against other players, and speed, how fast it can make its computations. So with strength, against most of the human play testers we played against, it had about a 50% win rate, so it won as many games as lost. And against the Battle Line World Championship silver medalist, Sean McCulloch, it went 3-7, so it had a 30% win rate. So not bad. For speed, it was able to make all its computations in between about 1/10 of a second and 1 second. This is really nice because it's significantly faster than a human player could possibly play the game. Also, relative to what we had last year, it's a much stronger AI. The AI was not very competitive against humans last year, and ours is. And in speed, we're running about 20 times faster than the AI each turn that we had last year. So that's kind of cool to see. So, the last question, kind of, is it worthy of the name? The answer is me. Is it the strongest instance of Battleline player in the world? No. But is it the strongest instance of an AI we've seen? The answer is yes, actually. The only other instance of an AI for this game that we found was an iPhone app. We beat it very handily. And compared to what we had last year, it was much stronger. And the fact that it was competitive against even the best players at Battleline in the world was really encouraging and nice to see. And also the speed is really what's given us a lot of woohoos, because it's so fast, this means that we can inject a lot more functionality, a lot more specific case checking and whatnot into the AI and still have it run at a very reasonable time. That means that there's kind of more work to do on that. So with that, special thanks to NSF and Obu for having us. Special thanks to Khan, Lee, and Colton Piper, who are play testers and played through a lot of iterations of the game. Thanks to Sean, advisor, for guiding me. With that, any questions?
Okay, questions for Tom?
So are you going to make an iPhone app, and how fast would it run on an iPhone?
Expect it to run a little bit slower, but about as fast on an iPhone. That is not the plan right now, but maybe in the future.
So you said there's two ways to win the game, and you had a weighted average for the strategy. You started out the game with going for like 5 cards, or 5 flags.
Yep.
And then you switched to the other one later on. Was that just like a hard-coded function that made that switch?
Yep. It was just a hard-coded linear function based on actually the number of cards left in the deck.
Okay.
So,
How often would a human novice beat the world's silver medalist? Just because it's a card game, right?
1%
So
of the time.
how many? How
1% of those.
1%.
It's way less random than you think it is.
Okay.
yeah. There's some randomness, but definitely the skill can overtake that a lot. Yeah.
Did you try pitting last year's program to your program?
Not directly, just because it was hard and very, very tedious to get the computer to play itself, but based on just the fact that we, as humans, beat it 100% of the time last year, or close to 100% of the time, the fact that it beats us about 50% of the time, pretty confidently say that's for sure.
Tom, did you make this available like on the internet so that any other people could try to beat it?
No, not yet. It's just we just got a little bit out of it. Maybe one of the things we did. Run eventually.
It'll happen.
It'll happen eventually.
Cool.
Okay.
Did you ever try pitting your AI against the iPhone app?
We did actually. So we had, that was kind of the last thing we did, was we played 2 games, and both of them were just extremely one-sided in favor of ours.
Okay, let's thank Tom again.